Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Well, now the families of those caught up in the 1984 miners' strike at Orgreave have demanded a full investigation into allegations of police brutality there. The Home Office had said it would announce whether or not there would be an inquiry by the end of October. Well, here we are, and there's still been no word. Well, Andy Burnham, the former Shadow Home Secretary and Manchester mayoral hopeful, has been campaigning for such an inquiry. Now from his constituency in Lee. Very good morning to you, Mr. Burnham. So not long left in October for this decision. Do you think it's not going to happen?
Well, no, I hope it is going to happen. We need a decision and we're expecting it tomorrow. And in my view, the case for an inquiry is overwhelming and undeniable. You know, I've got nothing but praise, Dermot, for the way Theresa May handled Hillsborough. But you can't be selective about which things you look at and which things you don't. If you look at the evidence trail from Hillsborough, it leads very directly to the door of Orgreave. This is the same police force using the same tactics 5 years earlier. In the case of Hillsborough, they sought to deflect blame onto the Liverpool supporters. After Orgreave, they did the same with the miners. So, you know, people need the truth. It's a reasonable request. And I make this last-minute appeal to the government today. Please don't let people plead for the truth. They deserve it. Order an inquiry into Orgreave tomorrow so that we can all understand what happened, draw a line, and then hopefully move forward.
And wide-ranging, I mean, you mentioned the parallels with Hillsborough, and I want to get on to South Yorkshire Police again in a moment or two, but a similar configuration for the inquiry.
Yes, I think so, because Hillsborough in the original phase had a panel that simply disclosed the papers that were held by the state, Dermot, and provided a commentary as to how that disclosure changed things. Now, the reason I'm standing before this camera today and talking to you is I promised those Hillsborough families the full truth. And I don't think they can have the full truth until we also know what happened 5 years earlier in the aftermath of Orgreave. It's the view of the chair of the Hillsborough Family Support Group, Margaret Aspinall, that if South Yorkshire Police had been held properly to account after Orgreave for what they did, then the cover-up over Hillsborough might never have happened. And that is why this issue is so important. It's also important, to be honest, though, to heal the rifts that are still there in mining communities. One of the miners who was at Orgreave, Kevin Thorne, writes a very powerful piece in the newspapers today saying that, you know, he wants his grandchildren to trust the police in the way that he was brought up to do. And if that is to happen, there does need to be this process of reconciliation.
And what about South Yorkshire Police? We've mentioned them quite a lot there in Hillsborough and previously in Orgreave. There are those now saying, well, South Yorkshire Police, should we look at perhaps getting rid of them, amalgamating them with another force?
Well, I think we need to have full disclosure, don't we, Dermot, about the past and if necessary, people held to account. I pay tribute, actually, to the current leadership, the Police and Crime Commissioner, for his willingness to say, well, we're ready to look at Orgreave and open up over Orgreave. But that needs to be done together with the government so that we get the complete picture. It is crucially important, isn't it, to the people of South Yorkshire that we repair trust in their police force. I'm not necessarily calling for it to be abandoned altogether, but I do feel it's unfair to those men and women who are out there today on the streets of South Yorkshire trying to keep people safe, to have these clouds of the past constantly hanging over them. The only way you can get rid of those clouds is to say, we're going to have this inquiry, we're going to give people the truth and the justice that they need, and then hopefully, as a community, we can move forward together.
Now, Mr. Burnham, tell me about your ambitions to become the mayor of, well, beefed up Manchester, part of the Northern Powerhouse, extra money, more powers. Do you feel, though, that the current administration, I mean, those ambitions came namely from the previous Chancellor, George Osborne. Do you get a sense the current administration is cooling on the Northern Powerhouse?
A little. There's a lot of talk of the Midlands engine these days. Now, I've nothing against seeing the Midlands regenerate too, but there were specific commitments made to the Northern Powerhouse in the Conservative manifesto, Dermot, and in my view they must be honoured. But also this policy is the right policy. I pay credit to George Osborne for being perhaps the first Chancellor to talk seriously about the North. But the big danger for the Tory party is they've created a clever slogan here with the Northern Powerhouse, but they may end up seeing nothing behind it, all spin and no substance. So yes, we need to see the government put their money where their mouth is, and they need to start actually at the autumn statement. You know, we've been trapped in this long debate on Heathrow, Dermot, which has kept the focus on London and the South East. People up here are saying, what about us? What about transport in the North? They're still trundling on packed trains over the Pennines. It's not good enough. So I want to see a clear timetable in the autumn statement for what is called HS3, east-west, high-quality, high-speed rail. I would argue that is the single highest transport investment priority for this country, linking the great cities of the North. I can't see how the government can justify going ahead with Crossrail 2 before that. It's our turn now, surely, and we need to see that investment coming to the north of England.
But on becoming Mayor of Manchester, you also need to see, don't you, from the government, the primary legislation. It hasn't been passed. And I was reading an interesting piece the other day on one of the blogs, so many of them, saying that why on earth would a Conservative government that nationally seems to have Labour on the run, create these powerful mayors in northern powerhouses like Manchester, when they remember the lessons, for instance, of Ken Livingstone and the old GLC in the 1980s. Margaret Thatcher got rid of it because he was a thorn in her side. Why would they create new thorns? Do you think they will actually go through with it?
Well, that's an interesting question, isn't it? But I hope they do, because actually it's the right policy. That's why they should go through with it. It wasn't actually conceived, Dermot, as the answer to the referendum and Brexit, but actually it should be embraced as such now, because what I think the referendum result brought out was a cry for change from many parts of the country that feel abandoned, that don't feel Westminster has worked for them. You know, we've had a kind of situation in national politics where the London perspective has dominated national policy. So when areas like mine here wanted help with manufacturing industry, all of the national focus was on the service sector. When we wanted help with affordable homes to rent, council housing, all of the focus there was on right to buy and owner occupation. And when we needed help with skills and technical education, the national focus was on the university route. That's why people feel the country hasn't been run for them. And that's why immigration surely was a part too, but of course there's a deeper sense of disillusionment here. So that's why the government shouldn't abandon this. They should press on with it. It's the time to deepen the commitment to devolution in England. And in me, they're not going to have somebody who is kind of party political for the sake of it, picking fights. I'm doing this. I'm ready to leave Westminster because I want to devote myself to improving the lives of people here, rebalancing our country from south to north. That's why I'm doing it. If the government will work with me, then I will work with them.
Well, before you leave Westminster, what's your views on the Richmond Park by-election? You mentioned Heathrow, and we all know it sparked that by-election with Zach Goldsmith resigning to stand again as an independent. And there are those in your party, senior figures in your party, suggesting that Labour shouldn't stand a candidate, well, because haven't really got much of a chance of winning it, and also to bolster the chance of the Liberal Democrats to embarrass the Conservatives.
Well, my main view on it is it's quite an indulgent act on the part of Zach Goldsmith. You know, there's a pretty significant price tag that comes with a by-election. And what happened, Dermot, to the old way of doing politics, where everybody debated things and had their disagreements, but when the party made a decision, that was the decision. And people then, you know, having had the argument, should have been there to accept it. So I kind of find it's a distraction. And actually, again, it will keep all of the focus on Heathrow, on London, on the South East, when actually the focus should be up here, looking at the unacceptable transport system that we have got. So I personally always take the view that Labour should contest by-elections. We shouldn't give the other parties a free run for narrow tactical reasons. But you know, that's just my view. But overall, I just think this is a huge distraction when the country needs to be getting on with the job of making sense of what Brexit means and arguing for a balanced Brexit that protects the economy. That's where our focus should be now, not having pointless by-elections.
Got a last question on that, Mr. Burnham. I mean, flowing from the Nissan decision and guarantees or not, we don't know for sure, given to Nissan and its investment in its Sunderland plant. If you become mayor of Manchester, of course, many huge exporters in and around the region, who will they be wanting? Would you be fighting for similar guarantees post-Brexit, that they wouldn't suffer extra tariffs if it is a hard Brexit?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm not against at all the government helping a key company in the north, but they can't just do one deal for them and leave everybody else with nothing. So the same, surely, Dermot, has to apply. And, you know, we need to know exactly what has been promised here, because there has to be a sense of fairness, doesn't there, to all companies and all parts of the country. And that's why I've been arguing, actually, that as well as Scotland, Wales and Northern Ireland having a seat at the table at these Brexit discussions, Greater Manchester needs one too, Merseyside needs one, West and South Yorkshire. You know, we can't again have a situation where the London perspective decides the terms of Brexit. You know, we need to hear the voices from around the country so that we get a fair Brexit that works for everybody. And I'll be arguing very hard, actually, that a hard Brexit will hit the poorest parts of the country the hardest of all. I challenged Theresa May in the Commons about this on last Monday, and I said to her, you know, has she looked at what a hard Brexit would do to the northwest of England? And I said, and if she hasn't done that analysis, isn't it very irresponsible to be burning our bridges with Europe and talking up a hard Brexit? And her reply was amazing, because she said, oh, I've never said I favour a hard Brexit. What that tells me is she's confused, actually, about where she's going right now. She's been ramping up the rhetoric, and actually when she went to the European summit last week, she found Britain very isolated and very at risk, actually, from the rest of Europe walking away from her. So I think the Prime Minister has got off to a bad start on all of this, and she needs to get back to talking about a balanced Brexit that, yes, responds to people's concerns on immigration, but does not see our economy sold down the river.
All right, and did you vote for your mate Ed Balls last night?
I didn't, unfortunately. I'm well impressed at his moves. They were never that good on the football field, I have to say. I played up front alongside him, and he didn't move that quickly then, so I don't know what they've been doing with him, but it looks impressive, I have to say. And, you know, fair play to him for doing it.
Might be you sometime, you never know. Andy Burnham, very good to talk to you. Thank you very much indeed.
And you, Dermot.